from yesterday. Yesterday was one of those times where I did everything right except win. Just all the big hands got cracked at pivotal points, so there's really nothing I can do about it. You just kind of got to laugh it off and take pride in how well you played. So let's see here. King Queen. This is early. Everybody's pretty stacked up. This is a good example of, well, you'll see. So we got to call out a small blind. When a small blind calls, he can have a lot of big cards. Like me, he can have King Queen. He can have a bunch of draws, things like that. So we're just basically betting range because without a 3-bet, we should have the ace more than him. So we're betting for 1/3. Now it is early, so players will draw super loose. So he could even draw with like 8-9, or 9-10, things like that. Turn comes off of 5. Shouldn't change much. So read stays the same. So we just go ahead and bet. Now we make the bigger bet. It is early, so the bet has to be a touch bigger. Like normally I would just go straight 2/3, but honestly we're so stacked up at this point. I mean, like we're right on this. This is like one of the first hands. Everybody's got like 20K. But if you look, we've got 88. He's got 88 blinds still. We started the hand with about the same. He calls the turn, and the river comes off the Queen of Hearts now because I have, or the 6 of Hearts now because I have the Queen of Hearts. It's not likely he has 2 suited hearts because that blocks, King Queen. It blocks Queen Jack, Jack 10 of Hearts, sure, but you're just talking about a raw draw. I really felt in this scenario that he had a hand like 8-6 or even 6-4 or something like that, like a hand with a draw. He could have had. He could have had a 3-4, or not 3-4, but deuce 4, something like that. But there are hands where this 6 makes a pair. So I decided that I definitely don't want to check here because I feel like after betting with the best hand but bluffing with it the whole way, I don't want to get beat by a pair on the river. So I decided to go ahead and bet for 1920. Because this is what I would do with, ace right here. Most players would expect you not to do this with ace king, but I think good players know to value bet this here. And he folds. And it's just an example of one of those times where you're setting up bet, 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 and you have to follow through, even though I should be good most of the time versus a lot of the draws like 8-9 or whatever like that. But the 6 is really in there, like 6-4, 6-8. It's really in there. He could even have like 7-8, right? And we just have to bet enough to get him off of it. You know what I'm saying? Like if he has the 7-8 of clubs, you know what I'm saying? He's taking a card on the flop. He's taking a card on the turn. And on the river, he misses the club. No improvement on the 7. But we still have to bet because if we just check back, we just surrender the pot. And that's dumb. So don't do that. All right. Oh, I screwed up. Let me get the rest of the hands in the report. Sorry, guys. Hang on. Let me see here. Replay all hands in report. That's what I was trying to do. Okay. No. All right. Move this over here. How's that look? All right, good enough. We can make it a little bit wider. That's fine. All right. We did that hand. Let's go on to the next one. Is that the next hand? Oh wow, that one came up quickly. King deuce suited in the small blind. We do go ahead and raise. We see a call here. A suited king is definitely good enough to raise, and we have enough chips, and it's a threatening enough point, and it is a 6 max tournament. This tournament tends to play more aggressively. I tend to do well in these by playing my range more conservatively, but very properly. So if you're closer to, fundamentally sound poker than the other players, you're going to do better. But what you got to realize is when you're in first, you're basically in the low jack. So just remove the first 3 spots. Stick to that. You don't have to be crazy aggressive. Just stick to normal, So we get called. The king hits off. Now, he shouldn't have a king or an ace a lot. He can definitely have a king. I decide to go ahead and bet. He does call. The turn comes off the 10 of diamonds. I think this is a better spot to check than it is to bet because if we had a queen here, I think we would check a lot. It kind of makes it easier for us to turn our hand into a bluff. Plus, we can beat hands like king 10 with a queen, you know what I'm saying? Like hands that'll call the flop, but maybe not the turn. He checks back, and the river comes off the 8 of spades. Even better for us because now we're essentially turning our hand into a value bet bluff, and it's also kind of a blocker bet. Like at the time, I was thinking this was purely a blocker bet, but it honestly it is value. It's kind of all three. It's like we're blocking because he can't raise unless he has like a really good hand, like a flush. Um, we're getting value out of a jack here, which sometimes does call. Believe it or not, Jack nine. Or it's rare, but it happens. And it also makes it very easy for him to fold a king that we beat. A king nine or something like that, or whatever. But basically, all the hands that beat us are going to raise here. We're rarely going to get hero called in this situation, and because the bet's so small, it's not even worth it to him to hero call. This is one of those value bet bluff kind of things. I mean, it is very blocker bet, which was my original intention, but I think this in pawn review, I think this is actually a value bet bluff because I'm making this one bet and I'm folding to all raises. So basically, I can get called here by a one pair that I beat or chop with, like a king that has no kicker either, or I get folded to by everything else that can't raise. So, and he did fold, and I thought it was interesting. So let's go to the next one. Jack 10 on the button. We see a limp out of first. That literally means nothing. Don't think people are trapping just because they limp out of first. That's that move. Everybody knows that move. And I don't think there's ever a reason to do that unless you're at like 5 big blinds. Even then, you just jam the chips in, right? So he calls. We pick up gut shot. We go ahead and check back only because this board doesn't really help our range. You know what I'm saying? Like 4, 7, 9, we shouldn't have a lot of this unless we have overpairs or a set, right? So we check looking for a scare card. The ace comes off, which is perfect because we should have all the aces. You know what I'm saying? He should have like small pairs, things like that. He checks. We go ahead and bet. And, reasonably for the turn, about 2/3 pot. He does call, and the river comes off a 7. And it's an interesting scenario because there is a world here in which he has a 7. But I think we still have to bet. And with this run out, I think this works a lot. I think he's got more draws and more pairs of like 10s in his hand than he can call, or I'm saying he has more draws and more pairs of 10s that have to fold than he has hands that can actually call this. So he did fold, and we just kind of stuck to the plan and just had to bet twice. I mean, I always say, man, a lot of times you just got to bet twice. Let's see here. Where's the next one? 88. We see a raise out of first. There is no small blind, so that's an interesting wrinkle. That's why I didn't 3-bet, just because I felt like it can look fishy when there's no small blind and somebody does this. So I decided to go ahead and just call in position with a set, and we make a set, or with a pair, and we make a set. So it checks to us. I go ahead and decide to check back. Honestly, I would bet here sometimes, but I don't feel like a jack is in too many people's range, just because the player raised out of first. You know what I'm saying? But it was only a min raise, and we're very deep, so he could have gone. The standard raise at this point, I believe, was 2.5. So he went small because there was no small blind, so he could have a pair of 7s or 9s or something like that. And if we bet, he's just gonna fold him when he sees a jack because he's not really invested. And the big blind can have anything, so he's really my target. Now he bets out 5 blinds, which is pretty damn big, and we see a call here. And when you see a big bet and a call, I really think you only have a few options. Typically, I'm going to be raising here, but I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, what hands really love this board? Like mine, and then like pocket jacks, pocket queens, and pocket 3s. The guy coming out of first, I really don't think would have pocket queens. It's just a surface read, but I don't think he's going to change the size of the bet pre-flop for queens. He may do it for jacks. He would definitely do it for 3s. But we beat 3s. And draws, right? So this is one where we're taking a little bit of gamble to see a safe-ish river and then get our value versus a, 2-pair kind of hand. So we just call. River comes off at 10, and this player bets 9.6. We see a fold there, and I do make the big raise. This is one where, what 9s does our opponent have, right? Not a lot, right? Like he has 9-10, I guess, and that bets the turn, but I think he would have bet even bigger on the turn. He has 8-9, I guess, but it's kind of just a bad beat if he got there on me. He never has ace king, right? I guess he can have king 9 of hearts, but there's really not a lot of combos. So our big bet here, without a 3-bet pre-flop, remember this was the original razor. We didn't 3-bet, we just called. Our big bet here on the river is usually never ace king. So the question is, do you fold 2-pair here to this bet? I don't think at this stage in the tournament you do, because it kind of just looks like garbage. And if you have a hand like queen jack, a hand like jack 10 just made 2-pair, and you're not betting very much. This is a very blocker, small value kind of bet. So I would have to call here with queen jack if I was him, and that was the thought process. But he folded, and I think it's fine. I think raising on the river here is important. I think people will just call the river here because they're like, oh, if he has a 9, then I lose, to the one-liner straight. Yeah, but does he ever have a 9? Like, what 9s? Like, he's in the blind, yeah, but what 9s? You know what I'm saying? 8-9 suited isn't there. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? And his betting tempo and timing and sizing didn't matter, or didn't convince me either. So this is kind of a little bit of a read. But honestly, I just think it's important to raise here because we have to get value with our good hands to offset the times when we get outdrawn with that turn move. Like if on the turn, right, we're playing this to try to get value on the river. If we get outdrawn on the river and we check, right, because if it's a really bad card like a heart, right, and we check it and we lose, we have to offset that by the fact that we were going to try to get value. We have to attempt to get the value. That's how we offset taking the risk of getting outdrawn and losing these smaller pots, is by when we should have the best hand, we must go for value and make them valid. You know what I'm saying? So it's a bigger upswing than a downswing for us for that move. And it's one of those things you have to keep in mind, and long run over your poker career, it'll make a difference. So let's see here, king 10 offsuit on the button in the 6-handed tournament, the 3K Turbo 6 Max. We see a limp, we go ahead and raise. This is a standard open. He's limping, so I put the extra blind on there. But I would go 2.5 normally, but 3.5 is fine. He just calls. We flop 2-pair. He checks. We go ahead and bet. We bet the dumb bet because we're trying to get the money in. He calls. The turn comes off. He checks. We decide just to over-bet jam. Now, look, there's 21 big blinds in the pot, right? We've bet 36.82. What we're doing is we are saying we want this pot to end. What hands want this pot to end? Flushes don't want this pot to end, of course. Sets don't really want this pot to end, right? My 2-pair doesn't want this pot to end. Other players does. But my 2-pair doesn't want this pot to end. So, to me, this looks like we're steal attempt. Now, he limped, we raised, and this was the board, which means we could have the ace of diamonds. He can never have the ace of diamonds, right? So when we make this big bet, in this tournament format, this player's read is going to be that we're just representing the ace of diamonds. Because we're saying you can't have the nuts, man, and we're just jamming it up. Now, that's not the way I play these things. I play these things correctly for the strength of my hand and fundamentally sound poker, because that's what you got to do in this 6-max, very ultra-aggressive tournament. You have to understand the true value of your hand. So I'm doing it because I know I'm going to get called. And I even said it in the game. I'm just going to jam all in here, and I know he's going to call it. And he pretty much snap called me. And with no hope to win whatsoever. Didn't even have a diamond to back up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's just kind of crazy that this worked. This was a big hit, obviously, on the stream. But I think this is one that illustrates, if you understand the mistakes other people are making, you can then exploit them. So this is absolutely one of my favorite hands of the day yesterday. Let's see, ace-6 offsuit, the worst ace in the deck, but it's a limp, so we go ahead and check it behind. The old king 7-4 flop. Player bets. There's really not a lot here, but I'm floating because of the ace of hearts. We hit the ace on the turn. He bets 3/4 pot. I decide to go ahead and just call it. The river comes off and he checks. I decide to check back just because it is really the worst ace, and is he really going to pay me with something worse? I don't know. Maybe he has king queen sometimes. I think I may have missed a value bet here, but then again, he only had 6-3, so he was just airballing. So I guess there's no point in betting, and maybe it's better for us overall that we did check. But I think I missed a value bet here. I think I should be betting somewhere around. In this exact scenario, I was really convinced I had the best hand. I think I should make it like 4.25 big blinds on the river, because that's going to induce a bluff. Now it's scary, but if we make it 4.25 and he makes it 17 or 20, we're just going to snap call it. If he jams all in, we're going to fold, because people only do that with the flush here. But we have the nut flush blocker, so I don't think we're going to see that hardly ever at all. Honestly, I think even a set or two pair, the way this played out, believe it or not, just calls the 4.25, because it also looks scary because we're only betting so small. We're obviously not bluffing. We're betting for value. So when we get raised, we absolutely snap call, unless it's all in. It's just one of those ones where their bet will tell you what to do. Pocket seven. What was that? Hang on, I missed what that action was. Hang on. How do I go back? Go back. So it's a limp. Okay, he raised out of first and I called. Okay, I'm sorry. We have the set. He bets micro. He bets 1/4 pot. A lot of players would just let this, just call this, because this is obviously he has nothing. I decided to quickly click it back. I just as soon as I saw that bet, I was like, that's ridiculous. And I just clicked it back, because even if he has nothing, he kind of has to call, because it costs him 1.62 to win 7 blinds. He kind of has to call, even if he has a gut shot, it's worth calling. And even if he knows his pairs aren't good and the gut shot is the only thing good, he still has to call. So I like this play. He does call it. The 3 hits the turn. And of course now we're going to go for larger bet, but not crazy. So we're under half pot. I think it's fine. We kind of look like we're full of shit. Maybe we have the spade draw, whatever like that. I think we can walk the dog if he has a king down here. I think we can get him to be all in. But he obviously doesn't like his hand. He's very uncomfortable. The river comes off, and we decide just to go ahead and blast all in. Which this is another one where it's like, we're just going to get hero called by the guy with the king, because he was trying to block us out. Like, at the time I said he might have a king here. Maybe he calls us with a 10. But I think king jack plays this way and pays off at this level a lot, because, players just don't expect you to be doing this with a set. And he had king queen. And it's funny because all the money should have gone in anyway, but the way he got it in was the worst way to get it in. Like, if he had bet the flop and then I had called, right? Like, let's go back to it. Let's say on this flop, he goes ahead and bets normally, which is 2.5 blinds, right? And I call it. Well, that puts 11.5 blinds in the pot, and he's got 26 behind to get in, right? So then this turn is 11.5, and he bets again, right? Which he should. And he bets 8 big blinds, right? That's reasonable. He's got 17 left. Whether I call or jam, I mean, if he does that, I'm just going to jam, because I have the 7. But I should never have ace king. I can have 10s, 7s, king 10, and that's about it. And that's not a lot of hands that beat king queen. King jack would do this sometimes, just because they got annoyed. The king jack with the jack of spades would do it. I think the ace 10 of spades would do it also, so you're ahead of that. But every flush draw is going to do it to you. So when he just bets here, the money's going to go in, but he can be like, oh, well, it's a cooler. But I played it right. What he did was not correct. Just check calling a min raise, and then check calling this small bet. And you can see about 6 big blinds. When he calls it, he's only got 19 left. The pot in relation to his stack is, he's getting 1 to 3 or 0.35 or 0.75. You know what I'm saying? His stack to pot ratio is 0.75 to 1. He doesn't even have a full pot bet. So when we just over bet jam blast it, like, he's just going to hero call us off. And he absolutely did not want to play this pot for all his chips, and we figured out a way to make him. So pretty proud of that one. So let's see here. We see a raise on the button. This player had been raising kind of big for this stage of the tournament, but it was, the, what was it, the quarter pot bet pre-flop button. But most people were just raising to 2.5, maybe 2.25. But he was just kind of one-clicking the button, so I don't give it too much credit. I'd already seen enough of it, so I decided to go ahead and just call. We do go 3 ways, and we flop, trips. It goes back to him. Oh, God, what did I do? Sorry, wrong button. It goes back around. We check the turn. He bets half pot, which to me is the value bet of the silly. So I decided to go ahead and just raise it right here because if he has something here, I don't think he can fold. So I pretty much am banking on making my value right here because there's so many bad cards for me on the river, right, that kill my action. So this is why I went bigger, 3xing his bet, just to figure this is all the value I'm going to get. He took a long time and then called. And then the river came off, and it was the jack of clubs. And I started to think, if I was just holding the ace of clubs, that would have been a way to set up the bluff on the river, and he's never going to see it. So when that came off, I decided to bet right around half pot, or a little less than half pot, just to look like it was a weak bluff. You know what I'm saying? But it's a nice sized bet. He took a long time, and then he did call, and it's kind of hilarious that he calls us with a 10. Because he should, looking back, I think this is one where this player would realize he's never good here unless I'm just bluffing. And the fact of the matter is, I was really only value betting at this stage in the tournament because, like I said, fundamentally sound poker. Out of position when I'm doing this shit, I'm never bluffing. Like, he just didn't really even consider it, So I think that's another one where we got somebody to play for way more chips than they wanted to. Like, if you started the hand and said, how many blinds do you want to play this pot for? He would not have said 30. You know what I mean? It's with Queen 10, the answer isn't I want to put 30 blinds in the pot, But we made him do it. So it goes to the cutoff and the 6 max. He raises. We see a call, and we do call because we're getting 6-1. Flop comes off, nothing really there. It goes check, check, check. The turn comes off an 8, and I decide to go ahead and set up the 2-barrel bluff. So I do bet small here. We get called 2 ways, which is kind of scary, but then again, what's the most likely thing to happen? When there's 3 players in the pot, and one guy's betting, and the other 2 just call, like this guy checked, right? This dude checked. It's the turn. I bet. And basically when I bet, I'm saying I have a 10, right? Or a 9 or something, or 2 pair. And then this guy just calls. Like, when he just calls, it's always a draw. Like, not always, but like there is a world in which he has Queen Jack and he's looking to pull the trigger on the river. But honestly, I think players freak out too much. Plus, he's only got 20 blinds, man. Like, I have inf blinds. It's like I just don't understand the logic behind that. So I'm thinking he's always on a draw. Maybe he just has a jack, right? Hand like 10 jack or something. Maybe even just like jack, king or something, And this player, I think, is in the same boat. He may have an 8 or a 9. So when the river comes off, we're, of course, betting. We're betting pretty big, and it's hard to call us with 1 pair there. And this is an example of setting up 2 barrels to get the job done and playing the 2 players off each other. Back in the day, this was called betting past the player, meaning this player was the original opener, and I bet past him, meaning I'm not worried about the guy behind him even. You know what I'm saying? In a live poker setting, it was described as like a guy raised, you called, another guy called, and then the original raiser checked, and then you looked at the guy who had just called behind you, and you went, I bet, and you were betting past the raiser. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't even matter. So you kind of conveyed this era of, and this was an old school, poker move that I read about in books. You kind of conveyed the air of, I don't give a fuck what anybody has, but you, the original raiser, you're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. This was a thing that was done in 7-card stud a lot, just because you'd look at their board, and then what would happen is the guy who raised, who just got bet past, would look at his board and go, oh, he must have all these cards. I'm counterfeited. So then he would just fold very easily because you kind of conveyed that message to him. Let's see. 7-7. We go ahead and open. We get called out of the big blind. Player donk leads into us for a quarter of the pot. I'm going to raise this every time. Every time. He's trying to take away the c-bet, right? Because if he checks and we c-bet, what can he call with? Not much. But if he donks and we just call, he can bet big on the turn and basically take away our c-bet. So we don't allow that to happen. So he just bet super small to try to confuse us. And then we just raised and took it right down. And I think it's important here. Obviously, 7s is good to do it with, but because we have the overpair. But I would have done this with any hand I opened. any hand. Anytime I see that move, I'm raising it. So if you have a monster in the big blind and you flop it on me out of position, bet quarter pot. I'm going to raise you every time on the flop. How you proceed from there is up to you. But 99% of the time, they just fold. So we see a min out of, this is the six-handed tournament. I didn't really love this, but I felt like I wanted to 3-bet small so that we disincentivize the big stack from 3-betting just on the button with anything. And I figured if one of these guys jammed, I could easily get away. So this is one of those ones where my hand's not quite strong enough. I mean, it's a good hand, but it's not quite strong enough to do that in this situation with my chip stack and the stacks at the table. But I think it's a good 3-bet specifically to isolate. And that's what we did, and we get called. And player checks, we go ahead and bet 1/3 pot, and he just folds. And this is a good example of not leveling myself. At the time, before I did it, I was like, this is the move. And I did it, but before I did it, I was like, I don't feel good about this. And, what I'm saying? It was one of those things where I have low confidence in because I'm specifically doing it to isolate this player specifically. And you got to find the bet where you risk the least to gain the most. And so it really kind of made me very nervous. But I was very proud of myself that I pulled the trigger on it and recognized the spot. And you say, well, Josh, Ace-Jack's a great hand. It is a great hand. And six-handed, it is a great hand. But not when there's an opener in under the gun. Standard. I mean, this player specifically I was going after. But when there's an opener under the gun, Ace-Jack suited isn't that great when there's a monster chip leader on the button, right? If we just call, he's so going to 3-bet just everything, right? And we can't even flop, right? It's also not great when you have stacks of 20 big blinds, 23 big blinds, 15 big blinds, like all these jam stacks behind. Like, this is super dangerous, man. So I think finding the right bet on the flop was really the key to getting all them to fold. I mean, so I was very happy with how I chose to do it, because this isn't standard. Typically, like 5 point, or the typical standard 3-bet here would be like 6.5 or 7. I decided to go small to make my hand look stronger. So then, because my initial read was this player had a pair in his hand, so then when he folds and he doesn't make a set, saying if we have aces, kings, something like that, or even queens, we can just bet a 3rd pot like we're not afraid of anything, and he can throw away a pair of 8s or lower very easily. He can even do this with a pair of 10s, believe it or not. I mean, honestly, he should be more sticky with 10s, but 8s or lower, I think, just folds like that. So, just an interesting bit of positional play in psychology. Ace-10 offsuit. We open in the hijack, excuse me. Get a call on the button, which is kind of weird because the player only has 30 blinds. He should probably be 3-betting or folding, but some players like to flop. We go ahead and bet 1/3 pot. We do see a call. King on the turn is usually better for us than for him, so we go ahead and bet again, and he folds. And this is another one where people can level themselves right out of betting. Like, I just did it quickly, and my brain was just saying, we bet the flop, he calls, the turn comes off a king, that's better for our range than his, so we bet, and he folds. There's no breath in that sentence. I didn't have to wait to see what was going to happen because it happens so often. The king is good for me, so I bet, and he folds. That's the way it works. Unless he has specifically king, jack, or a set, we're going to get this through about 95% of the time. So these are the pots that matter. This is the red line stuff, where you just got to keep winning the pots that don't belong to you. Because he obviously had the better hand than me, but how the fuck is he going to know that? That's the point. Deuce under the gun, 5-handed in the 6-handed tournament. I mean, it was very intense at this point, I remember. It was really interesting. So we get 3-bet and pretty big. And I was sitting there like middle of the pack, a little bit above. And I thought, well, if I lose the 8 big blinds, I'm still at 32. On this table specifically, and the tables aren't going to break very soon. On this table specifically, that's not bad. My image is pretty good. So I figured, I said at the time, I was like, I hate this, but I don't think I can fold because the expected value, I think I get it all when I hit a deuce. And it was 6. It was, I was calling 6 big blinds to win, what, 8, 10, 11 and a half. I mean, so we need, what is that? I mean, we need 50% equity. The point is this, is that when I hit a deuce, I'm going to get it all. So this 6 big blinds is an investment to get 40. 41, 2, 3, 43 and a half. So that's definitely good enough, and we're going to flop a set often enough to justify that. So I do call, and of course we do flop the deuce. That's nice. He just overbet, bets the pot like a monster. He doesn't go all in, which I think he was trying to do to look stronger. It really doesn't matter. If he had bet 13 big blinds, I'm jamming on him and he's calling. This instance, I felt like he was absolutely drawing dead, but I just jammed all in on him anyway. Because now he's got so much in the pot that even if he has ace 10 here, he has to call without a club in his hand, because like he's just put himself in this position, because now, there's 34, 37, 57, 58, 58 and a half, 65. There's 75 blinds in the pot, and he has 9 left. Like, what can you fold here, by price? And he took a long time, and then eventually he did call it off, and had a pocket pair of tens. I don't know what took him so long. If you're gonna bet that much, man, it's a snap call on the flop. Maybe he thought he was slow rolling, I guess, or maybe he just realized what he did. I don't know, but it was kind of silly. But his bet on the flop was like, he was so fearful that this is why he bet this, and then you just get raised and you're just fucked, right? Like, he could accomplish the same thing on this flop by betting, if he bet a third, right? Let's say he bets a third, which he's supposed to do, about 6 big blinds, maybe 5.5, right? If you just do that, like, you're not afraid, what am I going to call you with? You know what I'm saying? I'm going to call you with some overcards, right? Like ace kings with the ace of clubs or something, but not many, right? Like ace queen, maybe I'll peel 1, but if I don't have a club in my hand, it's kind of hard to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to throw away 6 big blinds on my 34 big blind stack for nothing. And if I raise you, you can decide if I'm on a draw or not, or you can just pitch the hand right then. But you would have still had 26 big blinds left. But, his bet of 23.5, he's trying to kill pot. This is why the other guy called me with the king 10, was because he's trying to kill pot. He's like, I have pocket tens, it's the best hand right now, and that's it, and the pot's over. And like, that's not how you play pocket tens, man. You got to get value out of those. So he's doing it wrong a lot of ways. Because let's say I have 10 jack, and he bets a third of the pot. I'm just going to call. The turn comes off, and it doesn't improve me, which it's not going to very often. He can bet again, and then I fold, and he safely picked up 6 blinds of value. If he does this, am I calling with 10 jack? No. The only thing that continues here is a hand that beats you. So this is stupid. This is just a bad freak out, overly anxious player. And he didn't go far, in the tournament. I'd never really seen him before, and we eliminated him, so that was great. All right, ace 10 suited. We see a min raise. We get a call out of the small blind. Not my favorite thing to happen. Not my favorite flop for it to happen on. So I just check back, because the ace king stands up quite a bit on its own. Like, I don't have to bet here, right? Like, what am I betting for? Like, I have value. I have backdoor, gut shot to the nuts. I have backdoor flush draw to the nuts. And my stack is at that point where if I lose much more, I'm not going to be in very good shape. 5 comes on the turn. We go ahead and check again. And the river comes off. We nutter butter it. And the player leads at us for the full pot. When somebody bets this big, it's one of two things. Now, here's the thing. 90% pot is a polarized bet. It's, or 80% pot, somewhere in there. It's, I have the nuts or nothing. This is, I have something I really like and I'm not folding, but it's going to suck for me when I get raised. This is a dumb bet. He did this fast. He clicked the pot button and said, boom, right there. Maybe this guy will call me with a queen. Well, I just jammed all in. And now his worst nightmare is realized. And he did eventually, after quite a bit of time, call it off with just the naked king, for the straight. And here's the thing. There's actually an argument here, a really good argument. Like, you bet 6 here, right? You have 34 blinds left. I have 25. Am I jamming this with anything other than the nuts? Like, if I had king queen, okay, let's just, devil's advocate. If I have king queen, I'm going to bet at some point before this river. Like, yeah, I'm going to check the flop, but I'm going to bet something on the turn, something to charge the heart draws. So when the queen hits the river, this is never a chop when you see this jam. And fun fact, you never want to be calling about 80% of your chips that you have remaining, or what is that, 70%, with a chop at best. Because I'm never rolling over a set of jacks here and you're just going to beat me with your king six. This is not a thing. So you're calling for a chop. And he could have folded and saved 19 big blinds, but he crippled himself and he went out like 2 hands later. And it was just dumb. It was just absolutely dumb. Like, no thought put into it. That's players who are looking at their cards and nothing else. Pocket asses. And this one's this is a fun hand, and I put this in here because it's a little lesson for everybody. So we see a player limp out of first, which doesn't mean anything. Hopefully he's trapping kings. We see a player raise to 3 big blinds, which is honestly okay. It's not great. I think since they're in such early position and he's out of position to under the gun, I would probably go a little bit bigger, maybe 3.5. I know it doesn't sound like much more, but it kind of is. It folds around to me. I decide to now 3-bet. So we have a limper, a raiser, and my big 3-bet, right? Player folds, and the limper goes ahead and took a long time, like almost his whole time bank, and then he called it. And the original raiser folded, smartly so. This is the flop that comes down. I'm looking to get all the money in every time. I didn't know anything about this player. They were fairly new, and or they were fairly new to the table, and it just didn't seem like they had much going on. So I went ahead and bet a bet that should commit his stack to the pot. I'm not trying to kill it, but I didn't want to make it super cheap because I felt like if he has something, he should go broke right here on the flop. Like if he has a pair, he should just go broke right here. And if he has a set, God bless him, right? He snap called that. Snap called it. So at first I was like, does he have a set? And then I went, no, he doesn't have a set. He has a pair. He has a pair of 9s or 10s, something like that. That's fine. The king comes on the turn. Kind of an action killer, right? But you know what? I said, fuck it. I'm just going to put him in because the pot's just too big. There's really no more play left. So I just put him all in, and he did call me. And if you can figure out what he has here, I'll give you $1,000 if you didn't see the stream. Nobody's going to guess this. Congratulations. King 6 suited. Limped it, cold called a 3-bet with the opener behind him. So he called my 11 big blinds, and if this guy rejammed for 30, is he folding King 6? Like, what happened here? He limped, raise, my re-raise, cold calls the 3-bet. What the fuck was that? This is just a lesson, man. Fish are out there, poker's not dead, and you do have to dodge landmines. We did end up making a little comeback in this one and going kind of far, but man, was that aggravating. We didn't cash it, but we were in it for a good while. Min raise jacks out of first. We see a call on the big blind. He checks. We check back, not because we're afraid of the king, but because there's really no point in betting. If he calls us, we're probably not good. But when we check back the flop, he checks the turn and we bet small. He can definitely call with any 8. Hey, what's up, new Teasy? How you doing, man? Yeah, that was a great one from last night, the King 6. Nobody could have guessed that one. I literally, when it happened, I was like, the fuck is that? Like, it was just this hilarious. That's the kind of shit I see on the Michigan sites. I'm going to tell you, man, Nike, that shit exists everywhere. It's more common on the smaller sites, right? Just because you're going to see worse players playing on the smaller sites like WSOP and stuff. At the lower levels, those are not great players. Like, I'm you know, I mean, you have to really have bankroll problems to suffer with 10NL playing on WSOP, so, you know, I'm there. But you're not going to see the most sophisticated players playing there because they're like, oh, I can play poker online in my state finally. Like, are they studying it? You know what I'm saying? They're probably not playing ACR. They're probably not doing whatever. They're just treating it like a home game. The WSOP sites play so much like Live 1-2, it's insane. Like, 10NL plays like Live 1-2, I mean here in Vegas. So mirrored, like, I could almost tell you the names of the players who are playing if I went out for like 2 months and collected some names. I could tell you who they were because it's so fucking fish cakes. It's ridiculous. And it's players who are never learning. They're doing the same thing for years and years. And you're going to see it a lot more on the smaller sites. But that stuff exists everywhere, man. I mean, it was definitely like a Sunday hand that that funny enough happened on a Tuesday, but it's just what are you gonna do? And here's the thing: if the king doesn't hit the turn, I still think he's calling. You know what I'm saying with the six because he put me on ace king. So when like a five or a jack hits the turn or something, as long as an ace doesn't hit the turn, I think he still gets the all the money in because he's heroing me. Like this is the kind of people who think poker is about. I don't think you got it. That's not what poker's about, man. It's a math problem. Most of it, 90% of it is a math problem. So let's finish this one. So he calls. We can absolutely keep betting here. We go for some value, and we see a fold. I think what happened here was we were most likely up against a draw, but I think it's important to not show these down because we want it known that we're tricky. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would have been interesting if he had called it and then we got to show the jacks because a lot of players at this level aren't betting for value for two streets. But I just don't think he had anything good enough to call us. I think he had like a bear seven. He was in the big blind, so he could have had like, I don't know, 7-10 or no. Well, I guess that might have called the river. I don't know. I think he had some kind of. He could have had 6-7. That makes a lot of sense. 5-7 makes a lot of sense. He could have had a spade draw. You know, just anything that really has no showdown value in this exact betting pattern. But I think it's important to go ahead and. Is that the edge of my camera? No. I think it's important to go ahead and bet these for value because you should have the best hand, most of the time. Now, if he check raises on the river, it's whatever. And you'll notice I'm about as short as he is. So, this was just whacking away and trying to squeeze value where I could. So it's really important, and I'm glad I did it. Let's see what else we got here. I do have a doctor's appointment. It's just a phone call in a little bit, but let's do some. Let's do a hand quiz because those are fun. How are you guys doing? Is anybody playing today, or are you guys just chilling? I'm probably playing later, but not till like 4 or 5. Let's see. Let me get the quizzes going here. Oh, come on. It's a little Jonathan Little's site. I mean, it's just got so much shit to it that it kind of runs slow sometimes. Might mean a lot of people are on it. All right, let's go ahead and let me pause this or mute that so you guys can hear this. What do we got? You know what? Let's start out with Evan, and we'll just go through a few of them.
Hello everyone, Evan Jarvis here for PokerCoaching.com. Today we are reviewing a tournament hand from the $2,500 buy-in World Poker Tour Fallsview event I played.
This is one where, like, it's a huge buy-in, and I don't think you should study these to improve your game unless you're playing and things like this. Online, $2,500 is equivalent to like a probably better than $200 nightly. It's probably like around the 330 buy-in range, or even the 630s, or 315s or 630s. So it's a big tournament, but there are always satellite players in live. There are always fish in live who just have money. You know what I'm saying? Because $2,500 isn't a lot to a lot of people. And honestly, if you only play poker tournaments 2 or 3 times a year, you might want to play one of these ones, right? It's the rest of us that are playing hundreds of them a year that can't afford that. I'm about to start some tourneys. Got to survive the limp calls and never folding players at the start of the tourney. I get where you're coming from. I would ask you this though. What are from the start of the tournament? And I think this is a big adjustment players can make. From the start of the tournament, right? What are you raising? Like you're getting 100 blinds at the start of the tournament. What's your opening raise? Like how much? I'm just curious because I feel like a lot of players make this mistake of not adjusting, and when you have more blinds, you should be playing for bigger pots. So on WSOP specifically, when I was playing tournaments on there, my opening raises would be 3x minimum. We didn't get down to 2x raises until the average chip stack was 20 blinds. Like, it has to be big, big. Like, I honestly, from the start of the tournament, I might start on WSOP. I might start with 5x opens. I really might, because you have to make a point. If you're playing 1-2 live in Las Vegas, the opening raise isn't 6. The opening raise is 10. If you have 100, probably 3. Go bigger. I want you to trust me on this. Go bigger. I don't think the survival thing is the thing. Just make it 4. Just make it 4. Okay? If you say to yourself, at this point in the tournament, I would make it 3 big blinds. Make it 4. If you say to yourself, at this point in the tournament, I would make it 2.5. Make it 3. Just a little adjustment. Okay? And at this point in the tournament, I would go to 2.5. Leave it at 3. If it's supposed to be 2, 2.5, just the whole way until everybody is at like 20 blinds average. Then you can go to 2 big blinds. Like, you really, like, you can even go 2.2, right? And err on the side of bigger, and don't type in round number bets. So, like, if the blinds are 75, 150, I'm going to make it 528. You know what I'm saying? To open in that scenario. And this will cause you to play properly. You won't be playing just, trashy kind of speculative hands. You can still call those in position. But I think opening bigger, it makes the point. Because you play 1-2, like I said, the open isn't, fucking 5. If you're playing at a 1-2 with these fish, the opening is 10. They're just opening for $10, like, all the time, just because players, like, they don't get it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Especially on a site where it's not represented in big blinds. Like on ACR, you can flick back and forth just by clicking a button. You can see how many big blinds it is, right? I just leave it on that because that's all that matters. But when you're playing for chips, like, you have 100,000 fucking chips. It's just a relation to the blinds. So I would say go bigger. You can try that. Nice, man. I think you'll see a much more positive result. You'll get flopped against a lot less, but when you get played with, you're going to do a lot better. And proportionally, your flop bets don't have to be bigger. So if you're going to bet a third on the flop, you've already made the pot bigger. You can still bet a third. You can still bet half. You can still bet 2/3. You don't have to go a bigger percentage. You'll see the much better results, I think, out of the general fish. It's just a little side tip. So, like I was saying, these queens are worth learning from because it's going to be fundamentally sound, even though it's a big buy-in. So I think this is a good one for us. Big hands, interesting situations. Usually these are the ones to get. Now, if he had like 10 jack, I think that's kind of something where you're like, I don't know if I play that at my $10 buy-ins. I play a lot of 1-2 live. It is similar. You raise and everyone calls. Yeah, go bigger. Or what I actually like to do when I played live 1-2 was go smaller than everybody else and court a raise and then be re-raising pre-flop. So like if I had like ace king in second position, instead of going to the standard 7 it was going to, I would make it 5. And then you'd see like 2 or 3 people call, and then somebody would make it 20, usually on the button. Then it would come back to me. I'd make it 80. Like, I would make sure that I had the opportunity to make it big. I also had tables where I felt like they were going to call so much. I remember one of the last sessions I played before I got off of, excuse me a sec. Before I got off of playing live because it was just too dangerous with COVID and everything. One of the last sessions that I had, I was at a table and I said, and I was under the gun, and it was 1-2, and I made it 25 to go under the gun. And the guy next to me goes, "What the fuck is that?" And I go, "I just want to see how much it is that these bad players will keep calling me. I'm really curious." So I think 25 is just ridiculous, and I'm really curious what the range is here that you guys are going to call with. 2 people called. The flop came off 9 high. I had 250 in my stack. They were both about the same. And I said, okay, well, I'm all in now. So I really have to see this. And they both called, believe it or not. And I had them crushed. One guy had pocket 5s, which was hilarious. He didn't even have a draw. And the other guy had ace 9. And it was just like doing something so out of the ordinary made the best case scenario for me. You know what I'm saying? So I think betting huge, and you got to change the narrative, become the table captain. All right, let's check this one out.
Earlier this year and made a decent run. We have pocket queens, early position. That's the first level of the tournament. 100 small blind, 200 big blind, 200 big blind ante. You face a 200 chip limp from under the gun. Pocket queens, middle position. Action is on you. What should you do? Should you fold, over limp, raise to 1,000, or raise to 1,600?
Okay, well, over limping is never an option here. It's just never an option, right? So we have 150 big blinds. It's still very early. There's a big blind ante. So there's, it's not represented here, but there's an extra 200 in the pot. So, yeah, sounds about right. Exactly, man. I mean, it's just really funny. And I was being a jackass that day. I was really shit talking people. Like, I was just like, you're a fucking horrible player. Like, I was just taking money and the guy was like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because I want your fucking money. Like, I would just be like, I have no respect for you at all. You've been sitting in that chair for 30 years doing it the same way. Fuck off. And it's just, it was hilarious to me. I was really being a dick. I was pissed because I knew I had to stop playing live. So we see the small blind and big blind. There's a big blind ante, which isn't represented here. Oh yeah, it is. Actually, there's 700 in the pot. So we see a limper out of first, right? That's never good. Honestly, I'm going to ISO. I'm going to raise. Now, what should the raise be? There's 700 in the pot. R 200 more call makes 900. So you add that together. So 1,100 is the pot. I think we can go 1,000. I was originally thinking it might have to be more, but I think 1,000 is about right. A pot bet's 1,100. 1,000's good.
In this spot, my standard raise is to raise to 1,000 here. Typically, I'm raising about 3 to 3.
Interesting thing that he said, my standard raise here. Your standard with queens when a guy under the gun limped? That doesn't mean Jarvis is exaggerating. That means that there's a lot worse players in these things than I give credit for. So he has a standard play here when somebody limps under the gun and he has queens in third position, which means it's happened more than once. So, and he does play a lot of live tournaments, so I would believe him. And I just think it's important to not gloss over that language there.
0.5x or anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5x if there are no limps, and then I'm adding in 1.5 big blinds for every limper who's there. Some people will tell you slightly more, some will tell you slightly less. The important thing is that you're sizing it up to both build the pot and give your opponent less than stellar odds to continue. Now, that being said, in these tournaments where people in the early levels are willing to pay more to see flops, and typically after they limped, they're willing to call large size raises, coming in here for 1,600 or even 2,000 in some cases would be totally fine. You build a much bigger pot.
This is exactly what we were just talking about with WSOP. It's because of the people have this wealth of blinds that you have to make a bigger statement. This is exactly what we were just talking about. That's hilarious. We were just saying this.
Pre-flop, and if your opponent is the type to overvalue a top pair type hand when they call a raise with a hand like Jack 10 suited or 8-7 suited, you can extract a lot more value by going for much larger raise sizes pre-flop than you're used to doing. This is one of the adjustments you can make in games where people play way too loose and way too gambly. They're not thinking about raise sizing, they're just thinking about seeing flops, seeing if they can make hands, and they don't care what the price is. The earlier you start betting in a hand, or the larger you start betting early on in a hand, the larger you can bet throughout the hand and extract more value and punish your opponents for playing too loose and too speculatively. I chose the 1,000 size raising, but 1,600 has a lot of merit in this spot as well. As for overlimping, that's excessively fancy and not going to be the best play. Same with folding. You get a call from the small blind, the big blind, and the limper. No surprise there. Flop is 10 of spades, 8 of clubs, 6 of clubs. Goes check. And a 10,000 chip lead from Kamehameha Blaster. Definitely a guy who came to gamble, he came to play. Under the gun folds. Action's back on you. Pair of queens. Blocking one of the outs for the flush draw. What should you do? Should you fold, call, raise to 20,000, or go all in?
There's merit to just calling here because bad players will do stupid things. I think a player with ace-10 here will go for it a lot of times, especially even if you just blast it all in his face, because that's kind of the way they play with draws. So I also think they're going to call you with all draws. I don't see much value in raising to 20K, although it does make them put all the money in So maybe that's better, and it pushes out the small blind. I think we just jam. I think now the SPR, like, there's now 14K in the pot. We have 29K. 2-1 SPR, man. I mean, if we min raise it, it's like the money's he's not gonna fold, but he may call. I don't know, man. I think this is a complicated one. I think I'm overthinking it. I think we're playing against a fish. I think we just go all in and take it to the bank. Yeah.
This situation is largely going to come down to your intentions for the tournament and what your game plan is for the tournament.
To win.
If you came here to fire the maximum bullets, which I think in this event is 2, this is a decent spot to get involved. We have a player who, from previous quizzes, we've seen does these oversized bets. They don't necessarily mean the nuts. They can definitely be medium strength hands. And against a lot of the hands he may do this with, we're in okay shape. That being said, we are rarely crushing our opponent here, unless he has a pair of, say, jacks or 10 that he's doing this with. And we don't have a lot of
clubs will do this, though.
Pre-flop raise of 5 big blinds. It's 3% of our starting stack. It is not a lot of chips. And if our plan is to only put 1 bullet in the event, this may be a spot that's actually too thin, too close for us to want to take it. If our opponent does have 2
that's some strong live player knowledge. I don't think that way. Like, even if I'm saying I'm going to re-enter this tournament 3 times, I play the same way as I do if I'm going to enter it once. If I was a live full-time tournament touring player, I probably would have different outlook, but I can't change my style based on the bankroll I'm playing that day. I decide what I'm going to do before I show up at the casino. How many bullets do I have for this? 3. Okay. Maybe that means I take some gamble spots more, but spots like this, I'm always getting it in versus my read on this player who is a blaster, because we're just going to be ahead of so much of his range. He's going to have all draws. It's nice that I have re-entries, right? Like, if this is a freeze out, it kind of sucks. But I think I'm still going with it just because of my specific read on this player.
Pair or rate, we are absolutely dead. But let's take a look at his most likely holdings and how we're faring against them.
There we go.
So first, against the board here, at both. Against Ace-9 of clubs, which is an overcard, nut flush draw and a gut shot, we are a slight underdog at 47.5%. If we swap that out for Ace-10 of clubs, which is top pair, top kicker with a flush draw, we are a slight favorite. If we swap that out for Ace-Jack, which is what looks to him like 2 overcards and a flush draw, but is in fact just 1, we are a slight favorite at 55%.
Okay.
If he has the combo draw, 10-9 of clubs, then he has 53%. He's a slight favorite. So against the stronger draws, it's very much a flip, and it's up to you whether you want to take that flip or not. If he has Ace-10, however, we have him in bad shape. If he has pocket jacks, we have him in very bad shape. If he has 10-9 offsuit, which some of these guys do, we have him in pretty bad shape at just 30%. But if he ever has 2 pair, we're the ones who are the 30% dog. If he ever has a straight, we're basically drawing dead. So it's important to range your opponent here accurately, because we see the most likely hands he has, we're basically flipping against. If his range is composed of these hands, and top pair, top kicker, and weaker over.
I mean, just by pot odds, it's correct. We're 50-50 versus all the best draws and reasonable draws. Even Jack-9 offsuit, I don't think he put that one in there. We're doing very well against that, but against the general range of flush draws with a pair or a gut shot or 1 overcard, it's 50-50. And now we can get in getting well more than 50-50. You know what I'm saying? We're getting 55-45 when we're in the lead. So just from a pot odds perspective, you can't ever fold here. So I think if you're going to look at it that way, I think it's a snap jam.
Over pairs and pair and gut shot, we should go with the hand. If his range is composed of those draws as well as 2 pairs and sets and straights, then we should definitely find the fold. And that's where it's going to come down to your read on your opponent. As it was, I felt that we weren't going to be a big enough favorite to justify taking the spot. I didn't think we were going to see an Ace-10 offsuit here. So I folded. But people who have played with this player before have told me he's actually a lot wilder than I thought he was. At first, I thought he was putting a show on, but in reality, he's just there to gamble. So we fold, and he shows us ace-9 of clubs, and against ace-9 of clubs, we made a fine fold.
I don't think it is a fine fold.
A very
like,
close
if you have
spot
that
and a
rate
very
on the
interesting
player,
spot. And sometimes you're going to see these kind of sizings in tournaments, and it's important to both be able to fold over pairs when you feel like the odds just aren't in your favor, and it's also important to be able to call these big over bets with one pair type hands.
I have an emotional investment in these tournaments too, man. I'd rather do this early, having to make this decision, than be hours and hours in. You know what I'm saying? Because he's going to play the same way the whole time. If this is like early in the tournament, I'm much more likely to take this spot than it is if I'm 7 hours in. You know what I'm saying? And we're still not in the cash. I'm far more likely to take this spot. Just because the money is definitely obviously most important, but the emotional investment you put into tournaments will wear you down. And I always say that, like, in Las Vegas, you see a lot of guys walking around on the side of the street, maybe pushing a shopping cart or just carrying all their clothes, and they're sitting there going, and they're like muttering to themselves. My feeling is that those are not homeless people or veterans. Those are poker players who cracked at some point. I mean, it's like I couldn't sleep at night after he showed me the ace-9, even though it's like, yeah, okay, you made a good fold, conservative, blah, blah, you're going to get better spots. Especially if I have 2 bullets in this, I'm going here. Like, I'm just going. I can't make the incorrect play. And it is a fine fold, but it's not a great fold. It's one where, we got full marks here because of the read on the player. We got the best score. I think this is one that Evan wishes he had back. Now, he did go very far in the tournament, so he feels fine about it. But I like that he was able to analyze it and say that he made a mistake. And I do believe this is a small mistake. It's very debatable, but small mistake.
In spots where you think there's a very good chance they're actually good, because if your opponent flopped a hand that actually absolutely crushed you, they may go for a check raise. That being said, this is a very draw-heavy board, and one that we're going to check back a lot as the pre-flop raiser. Probably not with this particular hand, but with a lot of hands we would. And so it's understandable that he would lead here with his draws as well as his very strong hands. So that's why I opted to fold. But I think it's important to look at all the different possible outcomes and the different equities we're going to be running against different types of hands, and to also consider rebuy strategy. If you are here to fire as many bullets as possible to acquire a stack that's going to take you all the way to the final table, this is probably a spot where it's fine to gamble and hopefully hold up with the best hand. But if you're here on 1 or maybe even 2 bullets, you want to be sure you get it in as a significant favorite when you get your chips in the middle. This is probably a spot that you want to pass on. So that's where your rebuy strategy will come into play as well and affect your decisions. Remember, everything matters at the poker table. Everything should be factored into your decisions, and those were all the variables I considered and reasons that I put into making the decision that I did, ultimately finding the fold here. Anyway, pretty long analysis there. I hope you enjoyed it. This has been Evan Jarvis for PokerCoaching.com. Really hope you enjoyed this quiz and that you learned a thing or two. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.
It's interesting, and it shows you how simple hands with just 2 streets of action can get so deep. And he's right, obviously. But I would have made that decision about how I'm going to play the tournament before I left the house that day. So for me, I wouldn't be considering it at the table. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it. But he's right. If I'm like, well, I'm going to rebuy anyway, that would tip my decision in favor of jamming here. So, yeah. And look at that. Gripst is online. I have my doctor's appointment in about 10 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and host him. And you guys have a great day. And as Grips would say, get stacking. I'll see you guys in a few hours. I'm going to come back to play some pokers for you. Have a good day.